Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host today, and today we're going to be talking about equipping the ultimate chocolate and confectionery workshop. So I'm going to get into sort of the premise behind this after I mentioned that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. You can go over to TheChocolateLife.com right now if you're not a member and sign up. There's always a free membership tier. And of course, please support if you're watching on YouTube by liking the video and subscribing to the Pod Save Chocolate channel. And if you are watching today, if you're watching live, you can go into the comments and let me know where in the world you're connecting from. And then in the live chat for YouTube or in the comments for LinkedIn and Facebook, what you can do is if you've got a question about anything that I say today, you can put it into the comments. I'll get all of your shout outs about where you are and comments and questions up on the screen during the episode, and I will do my best to answer them for you. And so what I want to do today is jump straight over to the post for this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. And this is something that I do for every episode. For every episode, there is a post on The Chocolate Life. If you go up here to the top and click under archives and look at the arrow, there's the Pod Save Chocolate archive, and you can go through all of the previous episodes of Pod Save Chocolate on that post. But today, what I wanted to do was I wanted to start off. I have no idea. Oh no. Anyway, for some reason, the YouTube link is not working, but you'll be able to watch it after the fact. I'll go check to make sure that it works after the post. But this is sort of like a fantasy episode for me, right? And it started off with the idea is that, over the course of the last decade or more, people have said to me, "Hey, Clay, you seem to know a little bit about chocolate. How come you don't have your own brand? How come you don't have your own chocolate brand?" And there are lots of answers to that question. But I think the most important one is that my belief is that the world of chocolate and the world of cocoa needs an independent observer. So somebody who is not in the employ of a chocolate company, small or large, or a cocoa trader or broker, small or large. So somebody who's not employed, who can bring, at this point, more than about 25 years worth of background and ask questions and do the research and talk about topics in chocolate and cocoa. And so for me, that is the most important thing, that there is an independent voice, someone who knows how to make chocolate, has given classes in how to make chocolate, has participated in classes in making confectionery, has been to cocoa farms, has been to small chocolate factories and big chocolate factories. I mean, I think that's important, right? That's the number one reason. But the number two reason, which is there, is that I have been in a lot of startups. My first high-tech startup was in 1983, and I define startup as any company where the stock options never go above water, the value of our options never rises above water. I'm joking to some extent, but I've been in a number of high-tech startups as a founder and as an early employee. And one of the things, at this stage in my career, and even a decade ago, I don't want to bootstrap a company anymore. I've been there, I've done that. It doesn't interest me to bootstrap a company. But if somebody were to come to me and say, "Hey, Clay, right, I want to invest," I'd go, "Okay, well, there are a couple of things that I'd want. Number one is I want a free hand in purchasing equipment, and I want to make sure that all of the equipment is stuff that I want to work with. And then I want operating capital for at least 3 years. And that includes all of the build out and everything associated with the workshop, the factory premises, right? I want to make sure that I have enough money to pay for sales and marketing, enough money to buy ingredients, enough money to hire the people that I want to hire to get it done. I mean, I want to do that before going in, right? So I don't want to say, we've got, half the capital we really need, so let's start up and see if we can generate enough interest in what I'm doing, or see if we can find capital from other people. I've been there, I've done that. I've gotten to the point where, people have invested $500,000 or more into the company. We've got an investor for an A round to take us to the next level. And, the day after they said, oh, we're going to sign the papers, they say, Friday they sell the sign, so they say they'll sign the papers. This literally happened to me in one. Friday they said we had an investor who would sign the papers. Saturday there was some industry news that was not welcome, and on Monday they came back to us and said we're not going to invest. So I don't want to be in that position again. Right? I'm in my mid 60s. I don't need that stress in my life at this point. So in which case, if that's what I was going to do, I asked myself, if those were the circumstances, if somebody came to me and said, hey, Clay, we're going to commit, X millions of dollars, because it's going to be X millions of dollars. And by the way, if anybody wants to do that, I would be happy to consider the offer, right? But this is what it is that I would want to do and how I would organize things. And so what I've done is in the post, I have created links and done some other things which will give everybody an idea of the equipment that I would purchase. And I want to start there. But what I want to do is start with a very, very particular observation. Is that what I've done is I've selected a particular bit of machinery for handling cocoa beans, so transforming raw beans into nibs, and then a particular bit of machinery to transform the nibs into finished chocolate. And those two have very, very specific capacities. And so all of the rest of the choices that you'll see on the list of things that I want are built around that decision or those decisions. So really, really, really key. So that's where I'm going to start off. And unfortunately, I can't find the URL of the pages. So what I've done is I've uploaded tech specs as files. And so you can download the files here. And what I will do is I will show you the PDFs. And so the first one is this machine from a company called TechnoTray. And it is the multiprocess R. So I first ran across TechnoTray at Chocoa, I want to say 2017, maybe 2016, 2016, sometime in there, and know about it because TechnoTray, the company, built a lot of the custom machinery that Gianluca Franzoni incorporated into his factory at Domori. So I'm familiar with the brand, know Gianluca, and just, okay, this intrigues me. And so what's interesting about this multi-process R, and let's just go and look at this image here, is that in one unit, which is maybe, it's less than 2 meters deep and 3 meters wide, so it's less than 60 square feet. What you do is you have a cocoa roaster, which is up here in the left-hand corner, right? You have a holding area where one roast can go down and cool, right? And then what you do is you have a peeler, which then goes into a conveyor, which goes into a UVC debacterialization area. So if there is any salmonella or E. coli or anything else which is on the beans after they've been peeled, then they will be sanitized. And then you have a cracker and a winnower, and which can generate 4 different sizes of cocoa nibs, up to 4 different sizes of cocoa nibs, if you want to. So you can have them separated out, or you can put them all together, right? And so this is a pretty cool idea. So if I'm looking to do something effectively and efficiently, right, what I want to do is I want to reduce the cost of labor. Then I have to invest in materials handling. And it would be possible to have a roaster and then go into a peeler and then go into, maybe I would put the debacterialization unit in the roaster, and then I would have a separate cracker winnower. So I could do this as 4 or 5 separate pieces of machines, 4 or 5 different pieces of machinery, right? But then I would need to have the materials handling equipment between all of those steps, right? And that's going to take up a lot of space. And there is the likelihood that it's going to generate a lot of dust. And so one of the things that attracts me, even though it is relatively expensive, so last time I looked, it was about 125,000 euros. This is I believe it's a 40 kilo roaster, 40 kilo batch roaster, right? And when I get done, once I've got it tuned for a particular bean, without any intervention from beginning to end, I get finished nib, right? In a small footprint, which actually could be behind glass and people could look at. I think it would be very, very cool. And that's one of the reasons why I like this. It's not just that. It is a combination of the capabilities and the footprint, and all of the materials handling steps are in this one unit. That's one of the reasons why I want to buy this unit, even if it is the cost that it is, right? So again, money's no object. I can buy whatever it is that I want, and this is what it is that I want. It's got all of the individual capabilities that I'm looking for, and it's got it in one unit. It's going to be more energy efficient. It's going to generate less dust and other kinds of pollutants. Really, really nice idea. This is what it is that I want. Now, having made that decision, right, the question becomes what goes next and what comes before it. And I'm going to say, so here is an example of a piece of equipment. If I'm buying from one company, I may continue to buy from the same company. But what this is, it's a cleaner, a destoner for cocoa beans. So I'm going to throw the beans into the hopper here. It's going to go through this cleaning step, and it's going to get rid of everything that's not a cocoa bean coming out the other side. And I think this, rather than sitting there and investing an enormous amount of time hand sorting stuff, I think this is the best way to go. Again, I'm going to invest in equipment rather than investing in long-term labor. And I'm going to want something like this. Now, this unit is going to be in a separate place. I don't want any of the dust or cross-contamination possibilities that might exist from where are my cocoa beans being stored and how am I going to clean them. That's going to be in a completely different area from from where it is that I'm doing the roasting and cracking and winnowing, which could be in a small room now, right? And I could have materials handling that takes the output of this and goes straight into the roaster. That is a possibility. But I think this is an incredibly important piece of equipment. Even if it's $6, $7, $8, $9, $10,000, it's going to go and do all the cleaning that I want very, very quickly and very, very efficiently. That's what I want for my ultimate chocolate making workshop. From there, what I want is a small shop roaster. And the reason why I'm looking for a small shop roaster, I had these things in my cache earlier. I'm not entirely sure what's going on. I have my VPN off, and so I don't know what's going on here. But this is a company out of Israel called Coffee Tech Engineering, and they have a small cocoa roaster, right? Tabletop coffee roaster. Will handle somewhere a couple of kilos at most. But it's got huge capabilities. I love Coffee Tech as a company and what they offer in terms of capabilities and options. So if I wanted to have a small coffee roaster, right, just to do tests with new batches of beans to get an idea of where my roast profiles were going to be, this is the roaster that I want, right? And I'll talk about this in a future episode, but if I was going to get a small cocoa roaster for my business, their 15 kilo roaster is also the one I would get, in part because there is an integrated destoner, a cleaner that you can get for this. So I wouldn't need the big cleaner beforehand because I would clean just before going to the roaster. But just when you look at the capabilities that it's got in terms of conduction heat, convection heat, indirect, it's got all of these, drum speed control, the ability to measure temperature in a bunch of different places, all the kinds of things, blower speed control. So when I want to play with the quantity of air that's flowing through the drum, I've got all those kinds of capabilities. So I like Coffee Tech. Again, not the cheapest in the world, but I'm not worried about price. Right. And so this is the Evo Cocoa Roaster as a shop roaster is the one that I want to buy for myself. Now, from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take a look at another product from TechnoTray. And that product from TechnoTray, let's make sure I do this properly, is their multiprocess C, as opposed to multiprocess R is the roaster, multiprocess C. And let's go take a look at it, right? So in one unit, right, again, this is around the order of less than 2 meters by 3 meters, so less than 60 square feet. What I've got is a knife mill, and what the knife mill will do is it will grind the nibs into paste. There is a ribbon mixer, so I can take the paste that comes out of the knife mill and add sugar and other ingredients into that. There is a ball mill down here, and that ball mill can recirculate through the ribbon mixer, right? So that's really good. And what's also really, really cool is that all of the transport of all of the materials is on belts, not pumps and tubes. So it's relatively easy to clean. So I can take everything. I think well, this may be for the 5 kilogram machine. So this hopper is relatively small, but you fill the hopper with nibs. It goes through the knife mill. It goes into the blade mixer. The mixer goes and circulates this through the ball mill as it also incorporates the sugar. When you've got it refined to the point that you want, what you can do, and you may do this actually fairly early, is you can divert it up through this unit here, which is also a belt, and it goes through a thin film conch. So this thin film conch is like, as you're doing this, you can actually evaporate out all the volatiles that you want, and keep the volatiles, or evaporate out the volatiles you do not want and keep the volatiles you do want in here, right? So in this really, really tiny unit, you've got everything you need to make chocolate. Now, for me, I would not get the tempering machine. This is what makes me think this is the 5 kilo machine, and I don't want the cooling cabinet here. But what you can't see is that you can get 25 kilo and 50 kilo sizes of these ball mills, and that the ball mill chambers, or cartridges, if you want to call them that, are removable. So I could have a ball mill cartridge for milk chocolate. I could have a ball mill cartridge for dark chocolate. I could have a ball mill cartridge for white chocolate. I could have replaceable ball mills. So I could switch from one kind of chocolate production to another kind of chocolate production very quickly. I could have one dedicated to handling nuts. I could have one dark chocolate one, which I would use only if I was using, for example, chili peppers, and adding the chili peppers of the chocolate and refining them in, or strongly flavored or scented, maybe coffee beans or something like that. But I've got in this very small space, again, less than 2 meters by 3 meters, or 60 square feet, I've got everything that I need to do to produce 50 kilograms of chocolate in 2 hours, right? And so I could, in the course of one day, produce 150 kilograms of chocolate on this one machine. 150 kilograms of chocolate in one day, right? It's 750 kilograms of finished chocolate a week. That's a reasonable amount of production, right? So, and then again, easily mixing back and forth between milk, dark, and white, right? And so again, this could be cool. You could put a little webcam on it. People could see what's going on. It would be really, really interesting. Now, I think that if you were in a pastry kitchen, right, and you were looking to make your own chocolate, and you had a source of nibs, and because of the connection here to Domori, there, hope you would buy Domori nibs. That if I could get something like this, again, without the tempering machine, maybe without the cooling cabinet, and what I could do is I could produce 5 kilograms of chocolate for my pastry kitchen every 2 hours. And so, even though it is expensive, the fact that it is small, right, means that you vary it and spaces at a premium, and you don't want to put a lot of dust everywhere, right? That this represents a really, really interesting opportunity. But what I would do is I would get the 50 kilogram version of this machine. I would get multiple cartridges and dedicated them to specific chocolates, right? And then be able to change over quickly, getting at least 3 batches of chocolate in an 8-hour workday. Right. So that's 750 kilograms of chocolate a week. If I'm doing that at 40 weeks a year, so that's 10, 15, that's like 60 metric tons of finished chocolate a year, right? That's a decent amount of chocolate. But this represents, this 50 kilograms a batch, 150 kilograms a day is the limit. This is what it is that is deciding where it is that I'm going to go next in terms of all of my other equipment purchases, just to let everybody know. All right. So having done all that, what I want to, so I'm going to get out of the, so I have two pieces of equipment, and that's all the equipment that I need to manufacture chocolate in terms of transforming cocoa beans and making chocolate. Just these two pieces of equipment. I would want a small roaster, and I would want a separate bean cleaner, just because that makes sense. But essentially, the heart of my production is two pieces of equipment, right, that don't require a lot of materials handling equipment separately. Now, having done that, I want to say, okay, what do I want to do if I'm going to? So I think that you can't. So you're a chocolate maker, and the question is not, I'm a bean to bar chocolate maker, but what can I make with the chocolate that I make? I think that what you want to do is you want to be able to offer a wide variety of products made from the chocolate or made with the chocolate that you make, not just chocolate bars, right? And so having said that, there, as far as I'm concerned, there really is only one piece of equipment on the market that I want to go and take a look at again, and it are these things called Cubo from a company called RoboCubo in France, which they talk about as universal processing machines, right? And they make them in a number of different sizes, from a 5 kilogram batch all the way up to like 500 kilogram and larger batches. But in terms of what it is that I'm doing, I'm thinking that a 40 kilogram machine is about the size that I'm looking for. And you can see it here, right? It's all in one. It's got recording for HACCP compliant. It could pull a vacuum. It heats, it cools. So you can use it like a Stefan, right? In order to be able to like do a ganache, right? And then, do the ganache under a vacuum, so you're not incorporating air into things. But this is a machine, so 40 liters, and it does a bunch of different things. So it has a mixing tool, so it's like a RoboCoupe, it's like a food processor, but it can do candying. It's got a vertical cutter mixer. It's got all sorts of other capabilities. Steam, you can weigh ingredients into it directly. And so if I'm thinking that what I want to do is I want to create pretty much anything. So here's a series of videos that I linked to. And all of these things, right? So this is the Cubo in pastry. All of the videos that they're showing here show what it is the machine can do. So one of which is here when it comes to refining. And so I can use this and I can make a ganache right in it. I can make marshmallows in it. I can candy citrus peel in it. I can, so the emulsifying is where they talk making a ganache. I can take fresh fruit and I can create concentrated fruits. By putting this under a vacuum, I can very efficiently remove the water from it at lower heat, meaning that I'm not cooking it quite as hard. It gets hot enough to do hard crack candy, soft crack candy, so I can make fudge. I can make bread dough in this. I can do almost everything that I would want to do in a confectionery kitchen in this one machine, right? And again, what I'm saying, what I've got here is, okay, I'm only producing 100. I'm producing 150 kilograms of chocolate a day. And what I need to do is I need to figure out which size of this machine makes sense if what it is that I want to do is I want to do slabbed ganaches. If what it is that I want to do is I want to do chocolate-covered citrus peels. If what it is that I want to do is make a ganache for all of this stuff. If I want to make my own marshmallows, what do I want to do? This one machine will do it all. Right. Once I get a recipe developed, I can store the recipe, I can push a button, and right, it's recording everything, temperatures and things like that for a HACCP compliance reporting. Right. And so what I want, right, as the centerpiece of my confectionery kitchen is a RoboCubo. It's one piece of equipment. I don't need a whole lot more. Maybe what I've got is a small one for recipe development and a big one for actual, or a much bigger one for production. But this is what I want in my in my kitchen. It will give me everything that I need to do and more. So hugely wonderful, right? So again, what it is that I've done is I've taken in my confectionery kitchen, I have boiled down pretty much all of the equipment that I need to one piece of equipment, right? I can have one trained operator who can do everything that I need in order to do this. And again, what's really great about the multi-process machines from TechnoTray is that I can have both of these machines, the roaster and the chocolate maker, be run by the same person, right? While I'm waiting for the roast to continue, they can be doing what it is that they're doing to set up the next batch of chocolate, right? So it's really, really labor efficient as well as space, energy efficient, even though they're expensive. But what it is that I'm doing is I'm paying for that efficiency and labor because those are the costs that I can control. I can't right now control my ingredients cost, right? I just can't do that. All right. So let me know what you think. Go into the comments and go, hey, Clay, those are interesting choices. Or, hey, Clay, I think there are better choices. Or if I had all the money in the world to do this, what would I choose to do this? What would I choose? I mean, are there alternatives to these? Yes, there are alternatives. I'm actually going to be talking about some of those because my schedule has changed. And so this coming Friday on Valentine's Day, I'm going to do the follow-up on this, which is I'm going to do the budget version of this. Okay, I have to make these decisions on a budget because I am doing it, right, from as a startup, and I don't have all the capital I need. So now all of a sudden my decisions are constrained in terms of how much money I have to spend and what is it going to be, right? So I will talk about some of the other things that I might purchase based upon lower budget items, less expensive items. This coming Friday, Valentine's Day, Friday the 14th. But what do you think? Have you heard of these pieces of equipment? Do you like, I mean, again, these RoboCubes, not expensive. You're probably talking about somewhere between 45,000 and 75,000 euros just to get in the door, right? Maybe not with all the options. But if I'm paying, if I'm in a big city, especially New York or someplace like that, and I'm paying $50, $80, $100 a square foot for rent, it's real or more. It's going to be really important that I'm able to control those costs and the cost of labor. All right. So from there, what am I going to do? So again, I now have the equipment for transforming cocoa beans, so raw cocoa beans into nibs, the equipment for transforming nibs into chocolate, and the equipment to make all of my confectionery components. So those things. So if I'm a chocolate maker and I make chocolate, what can I make with chocolate other than chocolate bars, right? One of the things that I want is a enrobing line. And so this is a photograph of an actual enrobing line that was made for a client of mine by my collaborator in Turkey, Oflas Mechanics. And this is a 40 centimeter wide enrobing machine. It is designed specifically, this machine is designed specifically for bottoming. So the client has a product they want to be bottomed only. And so there are some aspects of what's going on here in the enrober which are specific to that requirement. Although there is the ability to convert this from a bottoming only machine to a regular enrober. It's a 40 kilogram tempering machine, continuous tempering machine, and it is water cooled. But we have an input belt. We've got the enrobing section, which is temperature controlled, which is a good thing. We have an output belt. And then this device here is, among other things, it is I believe it is a sprinkler. So for this particular client, they needed to sprinkle things of different sizes and weights. So if you're going to sprinkle shredded coconut, you need a different way to get that coconut evenly distributed on the back of things than if you're sprinkling cinnamon sugar. And so this is one of 3 dedicated sprinklers, which can be moved in and out on frames, depending on what you're, so the item comes in, it is turned over, the chocolate is on the top, and then things are sprinkled onto that, right? So that's the application here, right? But one of the things about having a recirculating chiller for the cold water for the tempering machine is that you can have a chilled plate on the underside of the belt. And so I believe this is a water-cooled belt here, and then it goes into a short cooling tunnel. So this is completely custom, right? And I can tell you that, this part of it, which is the enrober and everything associated with this, is right currently in the catalog at about 20,000 US bucks. So I can have this complete customized unit, right, with what it is that I need, right, relatively cost efficiently. But this represents the kinds of capabilities that I want. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. I mean, we're looking at, these are motors, and they're using not belts, but they're using chains for the drives rather than DC motors. I mean, I get why that's being done. But also another thing that I like about these particular belts, which just drove me crazy on other machines, is these belts will never wander. I mean, there's a system which keeps these things centered and running on them. They're just not going to move from one edge to the other edge, right? But this is something that I am going to want, right? I want an enrobing machine, and I want it to have all of these kinds of capabilities, right, in order to get it done. So I'm going to run through and do slab ganaches. I'm going to run through and I'm going to do, I'm going to put chocolate on crackers. I'm going to put chocolate on pretzels. I'm going to put my chocolate onto candied fruit, all of those things, right? The 40 centimeter belt is, pretty big production, and this tempering machine has the capacity to be able to cover hundreds, if not, well, thousands of pieces per hour, right? It's got that kind of capability, and I can use the chilled belt on the bottom to make sure that the bottom and the top come out of the cooling tunnel, and they are safe to take off at the other end. So really, really cool, right? So this is what I want. There are other companies who can make this much more expensive. So again, cost is no option. It's just that I know what went into building this, and I know all the concerns that went into building this. And so I feel real comfortable in going and saying, I want a version of this one. Right. And I'm not worried about it being the prettiest thing in the world. I don't necessarily need to pay a lot of money extra for fancy sheet metal for what's going on. I want to make sure that the guts of this work properly, which is important. All right. Then what I want is I want a 3-roll mill. This is a company, Del Oro in Italy. They make 2 and 3-roll mills. They offer roll mills with both granite and steel mills. And there are a couple of reasons that I would use a 3-roll mill in this particular context. One of which is I could take chocolate and I could run it through the 3-roll mill, and I can make powder from it. And so that powder could then be used as a hot chocolate mix. That's one thing I want to do. I could use it in the kitchen for processing a whole lot of ingredients before they go into the RoboCubo, if that's being done. But primarily it's there because it offers flexibility and an alternative in terms of making things. I'd want a 3-roll mill. I'd want a granite version and a stainless steel version. I want one of each because granite is better for working with nuts and stainless steel is better working for chocolate, with example. And so it's good to have it. Last time I looked, there were about 12,000, 15,000 euros a piece. And there's a difference. These are slow speed mills, so they don't require water cooling. You could get a high speed mill, which does require water cooling, either a water supply or a recirculating chiller. But this is here because I want it, number one, specifically to make hot chocolate powder. And there may be other things that I can process in it. So having the flexibility that a 3-roll machine gives me in terms of making things are something that I want. My RoboCubo would make a spalmabile, which is a chocolate paste. But there are things I think I could do here. The roll mill will have a different texture from a knife mill. And so I could take it out of the RoboCubo and I could put it into here, or I could take it out of here and put it into the RoboCubo. I mean, it is that flexibility that I'm looking for, to be able to fine tune a restaurant and dial in the texture that I'm looking for, right? And so that's why I want at least one, if not 2, preferably 2 roll mills in my confectionery kitchen. And maybe what I will do is I will actually move this up into my confectionery kitchen when I get done. I think that makes more sense. It makes sense to do that. All right. So the other thing that I'm going to want is I'm going to want a coating pan. Right. Here's a company in Canada called Royce Metal Products, and they make reasonable sized ones to very large ones. And I'm not entirely sure, how, one of the great things about coating pans is that when you're making chocolate covered items like this, you have very high margin items. I mean, it is one of the highest margin items that you can produce. You want two of them. You want one which has ribs in it. You want one without ribs in it. Right. But one of the things to consider if you're doing large scale production, is that this is a 48-inch diameter bowl, will hold 250 or 300 kilos, but it has an automatic unloading. So there are vanes in the back that cover up holes. And so when you're done, these vanes open up. There are plugs which are made out of, I believe, high density polyethylene. They open up and the machine self-empties right out the back of the machine. This video here will show that process, right? And so I'm intrigued by the notion, again, if you do have big coating pans, then you do have the issue of unloading them, right? I don't necessarily know that at this scale I want to go into a machine this size, but I'm putting it here because it represents some of the technological capabilities I would love to have a machine. And so this company also makes copper pans in addition to stainless steel pans. So copper pans, if you're doing any sugar work, you need to heat the pan. Stainless steel pans are for doing chocolate work. So you do have both of those. Right. So, but I do want coating pans. I probably want two. I would like a small one for recipe development. Just making sure that I've got everything that I need to do it, and then a much bigger one for production. And I could, if I didn't want to go with a coating pan, I could go with a belt coater, which has got some real interesting capabilities. But my guess is if I'm moving from a pan to a pan, that's the way I'd like to go, as working from a pan into a belt coater. Just consistency in terms of the way things work. But I want a coating pan, and I want one which is mechanically sophisticated in order to take. I mean, that's one of the reasons, like belt coaters, you can reverse the belt and it will empty itself. And then you can also get a belt coater which has got a chocolate spraying unit across the top. So it will spray the chocolate, as it's being tumbled in the coater. So there are advantages in both styles, one over the other. I would choose one over the other. The reason why I'm using a pan like this is because what I want is I want to do candy shells, right? And you can't do candy shells on a belt coater because the belt is made from HDPE. So you can't do that. Oh no, right? Sorry about that. I am I'm sharing screens back and forth. And so sometimes if my cursor goes to the wrong place on the screen, it goes into screensaver mode. So that's that. So I want a coating pan. I want an enrober. And the next comes in, what do I do for chocolate tempering? So you don't need a tempering machine to do engrossing. The chocolate will temper in the process of doing the coating. But what do I want to do for tempering machines, right? And again, the choice of tempering machines is based upon that sort of roughly 150 kilograms a day of production capacity on the chocolate side. So max 150 kilos a day in 1 8-hour shift on the chocolate side. And what I've done is I've said, okay, what I'm looking for is machines from TheChoc. So this is their AX continuous tempering machine, right? And what I want is I want one of these dedicated to dark, one for milk, and one for white. I don't want to worry about cleaning them out and cross-contamination. I want one of each, right? They're relatively inexpensive. They have the advantage of being able to temper relatively small amounts of chocolate to relatively large amounts of chocolate. So this one is a 75 kilogram working bowl, but it will keep the chocolate into proper temper, down to under about 5 kilograms of chocolate in the working bowl. So you can empty it out more or less completely when you're done. It's also this, you take this off and you can put a brush and you can clean it out. So these things are mechanically compact and they are relatively easy to clean. But I want 3 of them. I want one for dark, one for milk, and one for white. Right? So the other thing that I'm going to do is, this is another TheChoc tempering machine, but this one is a batch tempering machine, not a continuous tempering machine. And this one, right, is designed to handle inclusions up to 10 millimeters in diameter at relatively high concentrations and keep the inclusions mixed in the chocolate. Right? So that's one of the reasons why I would use this, because I might want to do barks or something like that, and this would be a good way to do it. I may have large bars that I want to deposit, and so this would be a good machine to have to do that. Right? And again, one for dark, one for milk, one for white. If I want to do a deposit, nut clusters or something like that, I could do it with this. Right? Really, really interesting to do. Right? But again, I've got to have at least 6 tempering machines, 3 continuous, 3 batch tempering machines, one set of machines optimized for working with large inclusions. Right? They can handle small inclusions, right? And both of them are the same size. Now, in a pinch, these could also be used just as melters. I could just put chocolate in and melt it. I don't need to temper it in this way. And another thing which could be interesting is I could take the chocolate out of the continuous tempering machine. I could run it through, temper it, just pump all of it into this machine and keep it in temper, right? And then put other chocolate into the continuous tempering machine. There are lots of flexibility. This is the point that I want to offer here, is I do have lots of flexibility when I mix and match these kinds of machines. So I'm not going to use this as an automatic feeder for the continuous tempering machine, although I may be able to do that. What I could do is I could get batch melters. And again, if I'm getting these melters, not batch melters, but melting tanks, I would get one for dark, one for milk, one for white. And I've got the flexibility of moving things around without cross-contamination. And these things have optional internal pumps that will pump into the tempering machine, whether it's the batch tempering machine or the continuous tempering machine. So again, it's 9 machines, but there's a far less amount of cleaning, right, which takes time, and there's lowered risk of cross-contamination, which is what I want. I don't want to spend a lot of time taking a machine, working it for one day, cleaning it at the end, hoping it's dry the next morning, all that other kind of stuff. I can go in here and I can start to work without any of those issues, right? Which would be really key. And again, the sizes of these machines make sense given that 150 kilogram per day production capacity on the chocolate size, at least in one 8-hour shift. Now, what I really, 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 really want to stress is that this is another TheChoc machine. And what this machine is, it's a molding line. And this molding line has got a stack for molds. This is a mold preheater. Right? This is the depositing head, and this is the vibrating table. Now, what I would do with this is I would take the output of the vibrating table and put it into a separate room, and that separate room is cooled down to about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Because what I'm going to do is a little bit different from what most people would do in terms of thinking about maybe at this point what I want to do is I want to do a vertical cooling tunnel. I'm not dedicating, I'm not doing 100 kilograms an hour of bars. That's not what it is that I want to do in my production factory. I will do bar production, but I'm not necessarily dedicated on doing 100 kilograms an hour or 500 kilograms an hour in terms of bar production. What I've got is something relatively small that I can use. Now, I would almost certainly replace the depositing heads that TheChoc will make. With ones from Fairbank Engineering. I think that the ones that Daniel Fairbank makes at Fairbank Engineering are the ones that I would want to use. They would require little wings in order to be able to attach to the attachment points here, because this is a flexible hose, right? So there would be a little work that we'd have to do, but at this point, I'm not worried about the money associated with it, because I think that the heads that Daniel does make, are more accurate from edge to edge and from cavity to cavity. So I would want to do that. But the thing that is really, 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 really cool about the way this molding line works is that this tempering machine rolls in and out. So this tempering machine here is either an AX, which is either the continuous or the batch tempering machine that I showed you previously. So what I could do is I could run an entire tank out of the batch tempering machine into the molds, right? And they could be dark chocolate, and by replacing this hose, or having a dedicated hose and a dedicated depositing head, because even at $2,000 a pop, the depositing heads having separate ones, one for dark, one for milk, one for white, makes sense, right? Then what I could do is I could reuse all of these components. I could have a small molding line, and I can go from dark to milk in just a few minutes. Again, you can see that the depositing head is connected to these wings. If I were to use the Fairbank engineering, I'd need to replace these with ones that made sense for what Daniel is building. But you can see I can just take the hose off here, and bang, right? I can clean these independently. This is just elementary food grade hose. It's relatively easy to do, and that's what I want to do. So I've got an insane amount of flexibility. I could probably do, it says it could do like at least 100 molds an hour, which is a lot of bars, right? But again, I would take the output of this and I would put it in another room. And this is a trick that I first saw being used when I was in Italy with FBM at the factory of Andrea Slitti. So the confectionery equipment side, the manufacturing side for the bars and the pralines are all FBM equipment, although there's a bar Scirocco roaster. And I don't remember what it is that he was using to actually transform the beans into chocolate. It wasn't FBM because they didn't have bean to bar equipment at the point. I don't know what they're using now, right? But what Slitti did was he had the output of the cooling tunnel, or the output belt, right? There was no cooling tunnel, but the output belt in a separate room that was set at about 15 degrees centigrade, right? And it was a large room. And in that room, he put all of the molded products and all of the enrobed products and let them sit in this large room on trays, right? And that's what I would do. I would get trays like this. I wouldn't buy them. I mean, I think these are very expensive, right? I could buy them. Again, money, no object, but I could have them made locally, right, to do this. But this will hold on each tier three 275 by 175 euro molds, right? And so I could have someone on the output of the mold loader just taking the molds and putting them on here, and then putting them somewhere in the room and allowing them to cool naturally. Why? Well, number one is that I think that there is value in allowing the tempering, the crystallization process to take longer. I understand that it's not necessary, but for me, I think that having a $75,000 vertical, a $45,000 vertical cooling tunnel, I can buy 100,000 molds. Not literally. I could buy tens of thousands of molds for that price. And so I think that this is the way I would like to do it. And if you can build versions of these things that you can take the trays that you hold the product, that if you don't have a cooling tunnel on the enrobing machine, you can take product maybe on a paper takeoff belt, and you can put them on a tray, and you can slide the tray in here. So this becomes a really, really flexible way to be able to cool all of your work. And I would do some of the boxing, as much boxing as I could. I would do storage, I would do aging, everything that I could in that room, right? Because I can control the temperature and the humidity independently of the room where all of the production is being done. I would have a separate room where I'm doing the packaging. But this is the way, rather than, again, buying a really expensive either spiral cooling tunnel or a folded bar cooling tunnel or mold cooling tunnel. This is the way I would go, right? Because this gets me a lot of flexibility and I can devote time and resources in other places that make more sense to me. It's not just spending money for the sake of money. Sake of sending money. I do want to. I do want to think about the production process. Now, if I were doing hundreds of kilograms an hour of bars, then the answer is yes. I would absolutely want a cooling tunnel, a bar cooling tunnel. But for this business that I'm talking about, doing 100 kilograms an hour of bars is not where I want to go. And so I don't need a cooling tunnel like a folded mold cooling tunnel or a spiral mold cooling tunnel. Right? I'm happy to buy a couple hundred more molds, right? Rather than spending tens of thousands of dollars on mold. That's, again, I'm making this decision based on that 150 kilograms a day of chocolate production capacity, right? Which, because if I had a 100 kilogram an hour bar molding line, that's way more capacity to make bars, to mold and cool bars, than chocolate I can make. The mismatch doesn't make sense for what it is that I'm doing, right? And that's why I've made that decision. Now, what I would like also, in addition to the automatic mold loader and filler, like the one I showed you, is to have a small one-shot depositor. Now, this is a Brazilian company called Vonin I've worked with before. The people down the road from me here in Prescott, Orinoco Chocolate, they have one of these machines. They make two versions. They make the C3 Pro and the OSD5. This one is more semi-manual. This one is more this one is more semi-automatic than this one, right? Even though it says totally automatic, you have to manually feed the molds into this, right? The OSD5 has 5 nozzles. The OSD3 has 3 nozzles. You could use these for bar depositors, right, and not use the automatic mold loader, but having the ability to just slide in a tempering machine and change it from dark to milk relatively quickly makes that automatic mold loader, especially given the price, it's a third the price of the OSD5, right? But this is, if I am doing shell molded confections, right, then I'm going to want either one of these machines, right? Again, depending on the molds that I've got that I'm using, right? I'd probably opt for the OSD5. You can turn them off. So you can turn off certain. You can turn off ones that you're not using, and there are stirrers in the hoppers here, so you can keep inclusions and other things that might be in very, very small inclusions. You can keep things mixed as you're doing it. The hoppers are heated. It's not a manual process of pumping the chocolate from the tempering machine into these. So you will need some method to move the chocolate and the filling into these machines. But in addition to having the automatic molding line, I want to have a one-shot machine. And when it comes to small one-shot machines, these are the ones that attract me most. Now, because what I want to do is I want to standardize on 275 by 175 standard Euro sized molds. I don't want to go to 300 by 450 or 300 by 600 and some really, really large size molds. I want to standardize on Euro size molds for a bunch of different reasons. One of which is, again, unit costs. They're just easier to handle, which is the primary reason, right? If you have very, very large molds, they're much more difficult to handle, in addition to being more expensive. But lots of companies make one-shot machines in this size. I'm familiar with the ones from the major Italian manufacturers, and these ones from Brazil were made by ex-Solich engineers, and there's a lot to like from that approach. They also happen to be, I think, mechanically better built than the ones that I know from the Italian manufacturers. But your mileage may vary. I want one of these for my line. And again, the output of this, I would get a takeoff belt here. The takeoff belt would go into another room, right? And the molds would be taken off the belt and they would be put onto cooling trolleys. And so this gives me the ability to do enrobed items, panned items, things that can go into a mold, and a bar mold, and things that can go into a bonbon mold. So I've got all of those kinds of capabilities put together in that machinery. So I think I've got all of my bases covered. I think I've got all of my bases covered in terms of what I'd want to do. And I've got, one piece of machinery here. What I've done is I've got the resources. I'm going to invest the resources in tempering machines. Right. So that which it may be counterintuitive to some way of thinking, but I know that many people saying, oh my gosh, tempering is a real problem. And then I've got all the issues associated with cleaning out the machine and cross-contamination and all those other things. It's like the answer is simple. I mean, in most of the workshops I went to in Italy, they had dedicated dark milk and white tempering machines. And if they had an enrobing machine, it was a dedicated enrobing machine. They weren't swapping out all these equipment, right? You could, but they weren't. Right? And I think that's an important lesson to learn. Right. Now, right, then we're going to go through and the equipment for packaging. Number one is I want a weigh packer, pouch filler. This is a company in the United States, Logical Machines in Vermont. I know some people who have purchased the machines. They make a bunch of different sizes. They handle all sorts of packing requirements. So you could pack roasted cocoa nibs. You could pack powders. For if you were making a hot chocolate powder, right? All of these kinds of things, they have different sizes, right? And just easy machines. They are relatively inexpensive. You could certainly get much larger ones, which are much higher capacity. But again, if we're talking about that roughly 150 kilograms of chocolate in a day, in terms of what I can produce of chocolate, this size of machine, when it comes to chocolate into intermediate products, into the weigh pack machines. And so you've got a pouch filler under here, and you'd have a band sealer to seal up the pouch when you get done. So this handles the weigh pack operations. That's what these are called, weigh pack machines. From there, I want a flow wrap machine. Right? Here's an example of a flow wrap machine. It's from a Turkish manufacturer. If you're interested, I know the people who make it. I can get you one. But the reason why I'm talking about this is that when you look at what the capabilities of this machine are, you've got an idea about what you're looking for in a flow wrap machine. Not necessarily the speed, 250 items per minute. I mean, that's a lot of bars to put. But you've got a date printer. You've got modified atmosphere packaging. So if you did want a nitrogen flush for extended shelf life, if you do have, if you've got nuts or something on the back that could go stale or might mold or mildew, doing modified atmosphere packaging, nitrogen flushing of the pack would be a really good thing to extend the shelf life of what you're doing. But this will give you an idea of the kinds of things that you're looking for in a machine like this, right? The only thing that's missing on this one, and I don't know if it's missing or it's just overlooked, is you want to have something that says no item, no bag. So if you, on the conveyor where you're feeding things in to be wrapped, if there's no item, it won't actually advance the film and try to, you'll have an empty bag and that's just wasting film, right? But this represents, again, this list of things represents everything that you want in a machine. Now, there are other companies that make other machines that in the United States import machine from other countries, such as China, where you can have many of these same capabilities that might do 100 pieces a minute, right? But this might be a place. There are other versions of the machine that will flow wrap multiple items. Like you might. So if you could do flow wrapping of chocolate covered coffee beans. So that represents an opportunity. But if you're looking for a flow wrap machine, this is what you're looking for in terms of capabilities in a flow wrap machine. You can spend 5 times as much, right? I don't know you'll get a whole lot more capability if you spend 5 times as much. You can spend half this much. You can have many of the same capabilities, perhaps not the robustness. One thing to be very, very careful about when you're looking at a flow wrap machine, if it uses knives to cut the film, you want to make sure that the knives are really, 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 really easy to replace. If you have to go in there and it's convoluted to replace the knives, you want to go and specifically ask the question about the cutting knives on that. And then the final piece of equipment I want is a bar wrapping machine. And as near as I can tell, let's translate the page. So as near as I can tell, this company, Loreka in the Netherlands, is the company to go to if what you want to do is you want to have a bar wrapping machine. And this is if you're wrapping in paper, you're wrapping in a box, you're putting in a box. You could take the flow wrap machine, take bars that were flow wrapped, feed them automatically into a Loreka machine, and it will wrap a box around them. So that's the kind of capability. You could do paper and foil and paper. You can do all of those kinds of things. These are going to start, in the 60, 70,000 euro range. And then change parts are going to run 15 to 20,000 euros a piece. So the great thing about this is, you could have change parts for different sizes of bars. So you could be doing a Neapolitan 5-gram square wrapping, and you could be doing 60-gram bar wrapping on the same machine. You could switch out from wrapping, band wrapping around foil, as opposed, lots of capabilities. And rather than having to get different machines, what you just do is you swap out the machine. So this one, the 25, will do 150,000 bars a month. So if I'm doing, let's see, I have 20 days a month and 150 kilos, that's 3,000 a month, 3,000 kilos a month. And if I'm doing 100 grams bars, that's 30,000 bars a month. So this can handle all of the chocolate. And if I'm making 100-gram bars, if I'm making 60-gram bars, this one machine can handle everything that I want in bar wrapping, right there. And I can have it being the output. I can have it accept the output of my flow wrapper. And so with 3 machines, right, I've got a way pack machine, a flow wrapper, and a bar wrapper. I have all of the packaging capabilities that I need for my chocolate business taken care of. Now, again, right, what I've gone through is I've said, okay, right, price may be no object, right? So I can spend as much money as I want on this, right? But I'm careful in terms of balancing the production throughput capabilities of different machines, based upon what my fundamental chocolate making capabilities are. And so I'm going to invest in those, right? Because they provide me with the source of all the return for everything that is downstream. And that's what's really, really important to me. So I am going to start off with, okay, the 50 kilogram version of this multi-process C from Technotray, right? Because I don't know why they did this. It doesn't. Well, I get an idea. It's a design element, but in a very small, very very small footprint, a knife mill into a 50 kilo ball mill into a thin film conch, so I can get this all done 50 kilos in a relatively short period of time. All of the other decisions that I made about equipment were based upon that capability, and which I think is really, really important to understand, right? That if you've done any work in programming or electronics, you know that when you fix a bottleneck, all that does is show you where the next bottleneck is, because a bottleneck will hide the next bottleneck in production, right? And so what I've done is I've carefully considered, okay, the what it is that I'm going to do to make my centers and fillings and things that I'm going to enrobe and stuff like that, right, in the RoboCubo. Again, not inexpensive, right? A base machine is going to run probably at least 50, 65,000 euros. Bigger machines, more expensive, with all of the accessories that I could get. But I've got in one machine in a small footprint all of the equipment I need to make all of the things that I want to make, right? And it can be operated once recipes are put together, literally at a push button, and it does HACCP recording. So if I want to keep track, if I'm using dairy or using other ingredients for which I need to have a complete record, a log of all of the production steps, the RoboCubo will do it, right? From then, I can enrobe products. I've got I'm going to move the 3-roll mill up into here because I think that the 3-roll mill makes sense in terms of processing, in terms of making things which can be enrobed. I want a 3-roll mill. I'm going to get a coating pan, right? So I want to do panned items. The real splurge, I think many people would agree, maybe the real splurge here is doing 6 tempering machines. 3 continuous, 3 batch, dedicated to different kinds of chocolate, right? Then a melter, again, each one dedicated to milk dark, and white. A mold loading line, so a mold loader, which is a bar molding line. This is a small one. Again, this one is built so that I can just wheel the tempering machines underneath it, right? So I can change out very, very quickly, right? And again, the reason to go with the reason to go with the tempering machines this way, right, is so that I reduce the need to change over. I reduce the need for cleaning. I reduce the need for cross contamination, right? And then I'm going to have a large dedicated cooling room. And so I'm going to be cooling everything on racks, right? And I've got a one-shot machine going there. And then I have a whey pack machine, a flow wrapper, and the Loreca bar wrapper. There's one piece of equipment there which I think might surprise people, but it's oh, you know what? Well, here's what I need to do. Let me. Did I? You know, here. Let's see if I can do this. So I think I may have put the link to this in the page, and I don't think I updated the page. But I added another category as I was putting this thing together at the last minute. And this has to do with maintenance equipment. And this is a steam cleaner, industrial steam cleaner, which uses ultraviolet UVC to sterilize the water, right? And so you can vacuum up the chocolate on your floor if that's what you want to do. You can do that, right? And you're not using any chemicals. You can also, and this is what struck me about it the first time I ever saw it. I was at ISM in Cologne in 2018 when I first saw this, and they were using this to clean the belts on cooling tunnels, right? So you can do all the cleaning and all the sterilization of every piece of equipment and the belts and the floors and the walls and everything you need, right? Without using chemicals, so it's organic, right? Using this one machine, right? Which I think is really, really cool. Many people overlook what it takes to maintain clean working surfaces. You don't necessarily want to use antibacterial stuff because that may lead to microbial resistant bacteria, but UVC doesn't do that. Sterilized water, high pressure steam doesn't do that. You can use it as a straight vacuum. You can use it as a straight steamer. You can combine the steam and the vacuum. It's just really, really cool. And you can see that, yeah, it's not cheap. These things are $5,500 each, right? And that may not include all of the attachments, but it would be the one thing you need to keep all of your equipment clean. Now, I do know that there are some chocolate makers who clean the inside of their universals with machines like this one. So what they'll do is the machines, the fronts of them are hinged. They can open them up, and they'll go in with a device like this, and they will sterilize the inside of their machine. They will get all the chocolate out and dry and sterilize the inside of their machine on a regular basis using machines like this. So, I mean, again, sounds like a lot to spend $5,500 on a steam cleaner, but for a confectionery workshop, this where you want to make sure that your product is clean and safe for people to use, this would be something that I would not overlook in doing it. And again, right, I've got the budget to do it, and so that's what I am going to buy for my machine, for my workshop. And that's it. We've listen, I hope you found it interesting. This idea about equipping the Ultimate Chocolate Workshop. This coming Friday, what I'm going to do is I'm say, okay, well, now I've got a budget. What would I do if I have a budget, right? How am I going to go approach the same tasks, right, if money is an object, right? And what would I go do? So it's going to be a little more constrained in terms of what goes on, in terms of the approach for doing it. But I hope to provide a different perspective on the topic of equipping a chocolate workshop than many people approach it. And so again, I hope you found it interesting. If go into the comments, let me know. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, would you make other choices? Um, right? If you agree with my logic, which I think is also very, very important, just go into the comments. Let me know what you think, and then come back this coming Friday where I'm going to do the same kind of thing, but on a budget, because that's really, really fun. This one was a lot of fun for me. It's like, oh, how much money is it? It's at least $1 million, and just hard cost of equipment, and it could be more. I mean, I didn't add it up. That's another thing I could do is I could add it up. But I'm not going to. But I am going. I may do that for the small, for the small chocolate workshop, or doing this on a budget. I think it'll be interesting. And I haven't factored in any of the smallwares or any of the consumables. These are just big ticket items, in a workshop. But I hope, again, with all of this, that the rationale for why I made the decisions that I made, right, makes sense to you. That the approach that I took in saying, okay, I'm going to start here, right, with chocolate manufacturing capability and what I can do in a given day, right, and how that leads to the ripple through effects on all of the other machines that I choose downstream, in the process, right? And that's what I'd also like your comments on. Let me know what you think, right? And before we close, I will remind everybody that this episode of PodSafe, it's been scrolling down here. This episode of PodSafe Chocolate, like every episode of The Chocolate Life, is sponsored by or PodSafe Chocolate. This episode of PodSafe Chocolate is sponsored by members of The Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, you can go click on the join button, which is this green button on the top of the page. I'm logged in, so it's this account, right? This is the live homepage of The Chocolate Life right now, right? And you can see here's the post for today's episode. So this is the live page. So if you can, if you do have the resources, even to support what it is that I'm doing or just becoming a free member, go click on the join button and let me know. It's the greatest way to show that you're supporting me, and then also liking and subscribing to this video on YouTube and joining the PodSafe Chocolate there. And with that, this was a lot of fun for me, right? Coming up with, budget's no option. How can I spend my money, right? Was a lot of fun for me. And I know that the opposite of this, like, I'm constrained what I'm going to make, what choices I'm going to make, is also going to be interesting for me. But I hope it was fun for you. And I do want to remind you that between now and then, and this coming Friday is Valentine's Day, right? Between now and then, to remember that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you might want to reconsider your life choices. Until then, everybody, ciao.